Okay, so one of the other things here that Curry did that was unconventional was he shared the battle plan with the troops. Now, this was not, the norm here in the military. Generally speaking, soldiers just followed orders. They did what they were told, and that was it. They never questioned, and they certainly didn't know what the battle plan was. In fact, some soldiers were issued maps of the actual of the plan of attack, and for that, as Curry's critics thought he was nuts, and the thinking, of course, was, well, what happens if a guy gets captured and, or is killed in action and the Germans discover the map? Well, Curry was so confident in his plan that he essentially justified that action by saying it doesn't matter. The plan is that good. They won't be able to stop it, even if they know it. So, big question is, what's the plan? All right, well, Curry employed some of what Douglas Haig did at the Somme. He liked the idea of an artillery barrage, and he felt that that was definitely an effective way to weaken the enemy, to sort of pin them down. But what he didn't like was the idea of, just unleashing a barrage and then moving men openly without any covering fire. So Curry's invention essentially was the creeping barrage. And the idea of the creeping barrage was very risky, but if calculated properly, it could be effective. And the idea here is the artillery would fire overhead while the men were moving up the ridge. And what he did was he divided the Canadian troops into a number of divisions, and each division would move 100 yards at a time, but in staggered order. So sort of like a chess match, the men would move 100 yards at a time, artillery firing overhead, and then a different division would move. And then a different division would move, and then a different division would move, and you get the idea. And slowly, the men would creep up the ridge, advancing while they had this covering fire. So hence the name Creeping Barrage. The soldiers at the time, I think, nicknamed it the Vimy Glide, sort of like a dance. Against maybe not all odds here, but an unlikely way, the creeping barrage ultimately works. And we'll see that Canada did what was otherwise viewed as the impossible here. And in only 4 days, they managed to take control over Vimy Ridge here. Now, the significance, before I get into the significance here, the significance of this is enormous. Here's a picture here of the ridge itself, and you can see it was on Easter weekend that in 1917 that the assault on Vimy was to begin, and it was uncharacteristically cold here. You can see snow covered the battlefield. In some ways, the Canadians viewed that as a sign that it was sort of destined to happen, right? Canadians would have been very comfortable fighting in snow-like conditions. Now, Vimy, there was, as part to add to the complexity of this here, there was an underground battle going on as well. Because the nature of the battlefield was so close and it was, open fire, the trenches, as you can see here, which have been preserved, these are the actual trenches at Vimy that you can see. They're very, very narrow and very shallow. So tremendous amounts of sniper activity here. Is very, very dangerous for these guys to move because we were talking about such a, sort of condensed battlefield area. And you can see the signs of the, still of the artillery fire, the land being very much, pockmarked by exploding artillery shells. But underground all of this, there were also what they call Grange tunnels. So there was an underground game going on too, where they were tunneling to try to get underneath the enemy line, and they would detonate mines, massive explosions that would, blow up the Germans from underground. But this was going on both sides. The Canadians were also being tunneled by the Germans. So that in itself was quite scary, as you can imagine. Some of those tunnels do still exist at Vimy Ridge, and they can be toured in certain times of the year. But here we get a picture of the creeping barrage, and we can see the men here advancing while we've got artillery explosions, and you can see the men are quite, compactly moving together here. So that's a great picture here of the creeping barrage in action.